Hi, I'm Brent Johnson, and today I've come to Norman, Oklahoma. We're at the campus of the University of Oklahoma. With me is Dr. Damin Spritzer, the professor of organ here. Is that your title?
I am chair of the area and associate professor of organ.
And you teach on this wonderful instrument here. This is C.B. Fisk's Opus 111. Was installed in 1999 in this building, which was only completed in 98.
In 1998. It's a very interesting story because the University of Oklahoma itself is older than the state of Oklahoma. The state became a state in 1907. That's when everything was signed and formal. But the university itself was founded in 1890. Okay. And OU is also home to the oldest five-pronged arts college, fine arts college in the country. This is our centennial year, actually.
Okay.
So we've got 5 fine arts colleges, dance, musical theater, the School of Music, and all of those things that fall under that umbrella. So we're very excited that it's the centennial year.
Exciting. Well, this building contains some performance spaces, and then this hall, which is a little unique among organ halls. Tell me about this space.
You could definitely say this is unique. It's an absolutely stunning space. So 1998 is when it came about that funds were accrued in order to build the School of Music, and the final part of the School of Music was to build 3 performance halls, including this one. And this one is pretty special. As you can see, if you get to spend some time in this space, it's called Gothic Hall. The architectural style that you find on the campus at OU is sometimes referred to as Cherokee Gothic. I've also heard it called Collegiate Gothic, and it's a beautiful red brick with gray concrete accents. It's very, very lovely. It's a gorgeous campus, and it's quite extensive, and it's full of art. But this hall in particular, Gothic Hall, is called Gothic Hall because it's named for the style, and it is reminiscent of a cathedral. We've got a rose window, we have beautiful stained glass, we have these amazing arches, but we've got iron instead of wood, this huge ceiling, and a balcony, of course, though it's not like you would find in a church, and we have fabulous acoustics, but we are the public welcoming space. This is the foyer of the School of Music, so you almost cannot get in or out of this building without interacting with the organ. Visually or sonically, people stop all the time and take pictures of it. Tours come in to see it. Students stop. It's fantastic to show it to people, but it also means that we're never alone in here. We're never alone. Every note we play, other people hear, but I think it's a privilege. People eat their lunch down there. People come through and sit down and listen. I practice early on Sundays. There are some people in the community that I don't even know their names, but when I turn around, they wave at me. And they told me once they stop on their walk, they always stop to see if I'm practicing and listen. So we're the welcoming committee. The organ is the welcoming committee. And this space is 110 feet long. It's 60 feet wide and 75 feet high. And it's all this beautiful brick that you see with the light streaming in from the side.
Well, that's a fantastic way for the public to get to experience an instrument they might not have bumped into otherwise.
Well, the School of Music administrative offices are right underneath me. So we're very mindful of that and very appreciative of their support and their forbearance. So thank you to Dr. Jonathan Nickel also for allowing us to do this video.
Well, it also means that we might be joined by the occasional pass-through, so you might hear some footsteps, some doors, some bags rustling, because this is a public space where there's activity going on. But I want to talk about the organ here. As you said, installed in 1999. There was a gift to get this instrument here?
There was a gift. When people talk about the history of organ at the University of Oklahoma, it's pretty much synonymous with the name Mildred Andrews Bogess, and she was an extraordinary professor. She taught here for 38 years, and to the best of my knowledge, she still holds the record for an American professor with the most Fulbright scholars.
Oh, wow.
She had a full studio for years and years, and she was an Oklahoma native. She's buried just a few blocks from where I live, and I always take the students to visit her to pay our respects. But while she was here teaching, she allegedly lamented my dear friend Dr. Clark Kelly, one of my predecessors here, who followed her when he started here in 1985. He told me she had really lamented not having a significant concert instrument to train her incredible students on. So her estate made a pretty significant gift. I believe it was about $400,000, and other funds were provided because the School of Music was very supportive about this project, and Clark worked with Fisk tirelessly, and they came up with this incredible instrument for this incredible space.
Oh, okay. So we've got 3 manuals and 45 ranks, speaking all here in this beautiful case designed to match the room, and even has little, I see, Oklahoma shapes put in there.
It does. In the facade of the organ, next to the left pedal tower, about halfway up, the design that you see in the wood is meant to be the shape of the state of Oklahoma. And then it's mirrored on the other side, and the case is this beautiful, beautiful golden color, and there are some jewel tones also buried in the facade that are reminiscent of the stained glass windows that are over to our side.
The details are subtle, but they're there and they're thought through.
They are.
So.
It's a very compact case. It's an incredibly thoughtful, very effective, very well laid out organ, and most of it is vertical and deep, as you would expect in our petite loft here.
Okay. Well, let's start. Tell me about what we've got here. Is the great manual on the bottom here, as I would expect?
Yes, the grate is on the bottom, as you would expect in the French style. It's a very French-inspired organ, but since this is primarily a teaching instrument, that's really its job, is to be good at an enormous number of things. We get a lot of influence, but overall, the most significant and lasting impression you get of this organ sonically and tonally is that it's French inspired, but it's a very rich sound, very versatile, and very effective in the room. It's a joy to play.
Well, let's start with the grate here, and let's just start with the principal chorus and tell me what we've got.
Absolutely. That is something I know Dr. Clark Kelly put a lot of thought into. He got his DMA from the Eastman School of Music and wrote his dissertation on the Leipzig 18 chorales, so Bach is where we all start as teachers, as pedagogues, as performers, keeps us honest, inspires us to our very souls. So we want to be able to build a chorus on every manual. So for us, if I were to build, just starting from the bottom here, we've got our 16-foot prestant. I'm going to add the 8-foot octave, 4-foot octave. I'll do the 2-foot for example, but I'll take it out in a minute and tell you why. I'm going to take out the 2-foot and add the mixture because there's a 2 in the mixture, so we never use them together. So it's a very rich, very beautiful sound for our plenum. Sometimes we add the Spielpfeife in to give it just a little bit more richness. But it's really quite full and effective. So something like this is what I would use to play, for example, a wonderful piece that would use a full, deep plenum like that with gravitas would be Bach's Wedge Prelude. We can also, if you like, on this manual, you can get a very effective sound from simply using 8, 4, and 2 as well. It's very clean, very clear. And we have secondary plenum sounds on the other manuals, as you would expect. On the positive on this organ, we have a lovely, if I build that up for you, 8-foot prestant. Very string-like, very beautiful.
A lot lighter than the grate.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're in the room and you're going back and forth between these, In the room,
They're more similar than I thought.
yeah, but they're amazing.
Yeah.
I'm deeply partial to the one on the positive, but I'll tell you, our secret favorite is this 16-foot Prestant up an octave as a solo.
He sings, yeah.
It really does, contrasted with the one on the positive. It's just lovely, but back to talking about the building a plenum. So if we start with our 8-foot Prestant on the positive, 4-foot octave, doublet, and then I'll add our scharf. Very bright, very clear.
Definitely.
It's so bright that I like to use that scharf in the pedal.
Oh.
I like to pretend that that's my pedal mixture sometimes, unless we're working on something such as the Dorian, where you really need that secondary chorus. In the swell, it has a different character. It's a little more French. We do have a 16-foot board, and not Germanic at all, but just for the sound of it. My favorite stop on this organ is this violin diapason. It is the most beautiful, velvety chameleon of a stop, but this is the principle for the swell. We can use a dulcian or the 4-foot. For now, I'll use the 4-foot. Octavin and plein jeu. So I can play some examples of what those would each sound like. For example, in a fugue. But they give you a lot of things to choose from. The swell, as you would expect, is at the very, very top, so it gives you that wonderful sort of oceanic roar of the swell coming out of nowhere when you're using that all together, and it's really lovely. So we play a lot of Bach here because Bach is the most important composer perhaps that ever lived, and his music is so versatile, and we do preludes and fugues and trio sonatas and all the things that you would expect to have.
It seems like having all those options gives you not only just good choruses for Bach, but also just some unique ideas for players to pick and choose and to learn how to register these things and find the colors they're looking for.
That's always, I think, one of the challenges with an organ that's designed to be eclectic. When you're teaching about the original styles, you say to the student in organ literature class, were we in Germany, we would do this, but since we are here, we would do this. And if a German organist came here, they would do this. And if a French organist, because we have to adapt, but we want to know what the original sounds would have been, and then we get to change them. But everything on this organ is really satisfying. We can do Bach with a lot of gravitas. Like in the G minor Fantasia and Fugue, I like to use the 16-foot bombard from the swell coupled down to the great mixture, because it has, with the box halfway closed or even open, it's surprisingly clear in the figuration, and it really adds a very special sound to it and gives it even more gravitas, and it works very well. We can also get a lot of sparkle by using just the foundations for something like the pièce d'orgue. You can use just the flutes that are harmonic in the swell. Or if you want something that's a little crisper, the flutes in the positif, I think, are designed to be the most neoclassic, much more approaching kind of that sound. A little cleaner, a little sharper. The great would be the brightest. For me, these are a little too bright because I have those other choices. I don't like the gap there as much, but I secretly really love gapped registrations at the beginning of the pièce d'orgue, so it works very well. So we have a lot of choices. Trio sonatas in here also, we have the clarity, but we don't have a million options for trio sonatas. So my favorite things to use, sometimes the simplest is the best. Simplest is the most beautiful, not always. This is, I say to my students, this is not a smoke and mirrors organ. This organ is deeply honest and will tell you exactly what it thinks very eloquently, very clearly. But there are some hidden sounds in other tessituras. For one of our favorite stops to use, actually the quietest stop on the organ is the 16-foot Borden in the swell, in the récit. But if we play it up an octave instead of down here, if we play it up, that's our quietest stop. So it's really lovely to use that up an octave. And even though this is a French organ, that's our only Borden in the manual. So when you're playing something that asks you for a Borden sound, we have beautiful flutes, but not that particular quality except here. So that gets a lot of use in other octaves. I love to use that in the Duraflé Vene Creator. It just bubbles along like a brook. It's really magical in that sound.
Well, tell me about some of the other flutes here, specifically what we have and their construction.
The flute traversière in the swell is probably my favorite flute on the organ, though. The flute Harmonic is very special. This is the second harmonic flute. I use them a lot together or in dialogue, even though they're separated geographically, but it's very bubbling, it's very glassine, and it really soars into the room. And its sister would be the flute octaviante. They're really, really lovely, and they sound exquisite in Duraflé. In the opening of the Duraflé Vene Creator, they just make it come right off the page, and I thought that would be a good thing to use for today. The flute in the positif is the one that is really the most neoclassic, the gedacht, and it's very nice, but you can use it for pretty much anything. We have a Spielpfeife on the grate. It's a little more string-like, so when I'm building up a crescendo, it's the one that's sort of most sympathetic to start with. You'd think you would go terracing, but the Spielpfeife is just a little bit more, its harmonics are a little more subtle while you're building up a crescendo and all that. And then we have our beautiful, beautiful flute Harmonic, which just like you want, it has that treble ascendancy and blooms. So it's really, really lovely. and we use it all the time. I often like to double it with the Spielpfeife, not because it needs it, but it does help it kind of soar into the room. Just a little more roundness, but by itself it's perfectly lovely, and I'll show that in the Vierne Clair de Lune, and in a little bit of Léonce de Saint-Martin. So the flute harmonique on the grate is absolutely wonderful. I am always so happy when any organ I go to play has just at least one giant singing flute. It's such a useful stop. So the flute harmonique here is absolutely lovely, and I use it by itself quite often. Sometimes, just to round it out a little bit, in recital, for example, I will add the Spielpfeife to double at the same pitch level. It just gives it just a little more of a singing quality. It works beautifully on its own, but too much is never enough. I'm a romantic, a little bit of romantic excess, so adding makes it even more wonderful. So once it's on, you don't even know it's there.
Yeah, just adds a little more body to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Is that everything in our grate then, besides the reeds?
That's all of our flutes. Well, I didn't talk about the 4-foot Rohrflöte on the Gedeckt. I'm sorry, I was thinking about 8-foot pitch because, again, I'm a romantic. I think you can't have too many 8-foot stops for me, ever. You really can't. But the Rohrflöte is marvelous. It sings into the room. A friend of mine once joked that it's a Rohrflöte en chamade. When you add it to anything you're playing, you know it's there. This is a stop that cannot be silenced, but it's fantastic. Just very clean, very clear.
How does that compare with the 8-foot Gedeckt again?
They are wonderful together, especially for a trio sonata.
It's remarkable how big that is.
It's huge. Yeah, it really is. And if you were in the back of the room, you know exactly when it's on. Contrasted with the 4-foot flute octaviant, they're very different. Which is great. Yeah, to have them be both so sweet and both so lovely, but totally different in timbre.
All right, we have some more stops there in the positive, then going up to complete our cornet there.
Yes. Yeah, we can build several different cornets on this organ. Talking about a cornet décomposé is, you know how much fun that is in lessons, and especially for somebody for whom the idea of mutations and things like that, and you talk about the harmonics that are involved, it's really wonderful. So we can build, the biggest one that we can build, starting with the prestant, of course, would be 8-foot, 4-foot octave, Nazard, doublet, and tier. And it's pretty piquant. And mercifully, it goes all the way. Which is wonderful. I'm really fond of it when they don't stop, though I understand the historicism and the need for that sometimes in case design. So that's the largest one, and I'll use that as an example. I'll play a little bit of the de Grigny Récit de Tiercentaille because it shows it so beautifully in the register where it's designed. We can also build a number of softer ones. I can start by swapping out just the prestant for the Gedeckt. And it's totally different. Or if I remove the doublet and then swap out the Gedeckt. Then if I swap out to the Rohrflöte, we really get a change.
Really different, yeah.
I can do a cornet without the tiers, or it's no longer a cornet, but... And this is my favorite. I really love gapped registrations. And that one, the Gadact here with the Nazard, because of their scaling, that's just a particularly beautiful, very, very versatile solo, like in the Gergboom, Vaterunser, or things like that, where you want a gentle sound. So we can build all these different sounds using the Nazard and the tierce to give that cornet quality to our things. We've also got a fabulous crumhorn on this organ. It's almost like a little trumpet. It is nothing like a clarinet. It is unenclosed, but it is a beautiful stop, and I'll play that in some de Grigny, but it's just wonderful to use in all kinds of styles. It's very large. It doesn't like fast ornaments. I think organs tell us what they want, and this one's definitely saying no, or no, but you can use it in howls, but it's really full.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, it would be. It's very singing. It's very warm, but it's quite large. It really comes out into the room. I made a recording here earlier this year where I work really hard to give every stop on the organ a chance to have its own moment. And I was using the crumhorn contrasted with the clairon in the pedal. And my recording engineer said, "Those two trumpets are too similar." And I said, guess what? They're not, neither. So it was an interesting exercise for me as well, because I don't hear the organ in the room so often, always being up close to it. So they're similar, but it's a fantastic, fantastic crumhorn.
Well, let's talk. We also have some strings in the swell that we passed over.
These strings have ruined me for all other strings except maybe Kimball strings, which till the day I die will be the most beautiful thing standing in the chamber of the Wanamaker. I'll never be the same. So the pair of strings here, this magical violin diapason, which is just like chocolate velvet darkness. It's exquisite. Very rich all by itself. Full, it's gorgeous. Full of harmonic content, but warm and round, and we add it to things all the time, especially since the swell boxes here the swell box is so effective. So effective. You can just lock it down. You can use this to shade a lot of other stops, but with its sibling. Could you ask for more smoke than that?
Yeah,
so
amazing.
they're fantastic. They're very loud, which is great because in the context of the voicing of the rest of this organ, they're perfect. They're just beautiful. I like to use them also with the flute to give it just that little tiny bit more roundness. That that also gives me one more level of decrescendo,
Yeah, right.
because they only get so soft. But
Okay.
they're just wonderful. And when you add them to all of the foundations, for example, the excerpt I'd like to use for that is from Viern's Third Symphony, the slow movement. It is the most magical sound. It's very French. It's very, very rich. It has this. It becomes a melange in the room that's really dreamy, and you want to sort of float away in it. I do.
Okay, and then there's one more 4-foot in the swell.
The Dulcian. It is an exquisite 4-foot string. This is another one. I use it all the time. It's very keen, but very beautiful. And it's a surprise timbre you can add to other registrations to give them a uniqueness that's really unexpected. It's a beautiful stop. So if you have the two strings together, it's just very clean. If you add the flute, but if you're doing anything else, I do a lot of pieces where there's a crescendo involved, and you want that to be as subtle as you can. That's the first 4-foot I add, always, because when the box is closed, you don't even know it's there. You just think there's this tiny little spark until you open the box. It's an amazing stop.
I have spoken many times about the usefulness of having these 4-foot string colors that are not really loud.
A 4-foot fugara, something like this, a dulcian like this, magic.
I know Andrew Schaefer and I have discussed this, and of course he studied here.
Yes, he did.
And played on this organ, so maybe there's some ideas being transferred there.
I hope so, but I would say that's one of the best examples there is, without question, and we use it all the time. It was so prescient of Dr. Kelly to put that on the organ. We use it in an incredible number of ways, and the dulcian is another stop where it provides us a timbre we have nowhere else if we use it in a different register. It's really, that's one of the smoke and mirrors stop. The Borden 16 is a smoke and mirrors stop. The Dulcian, because you can use it in these other secret ways. They're really incredible colors.
Well, let's go back to the reeds.
Yeah. There are big reeds in this organ. I love them. We only deploy them with care because they mean what they say and they say what they mean, which is exactly what you want. The real power of this organ comes from the battery of reeds in the swell. There's not a 4-foot, but we do have a 16-foot bombard, 8-foot trumpet, and an 8-foot hautbois. It's really lovely, and I'll use them in the literature that I picked for today, and then I'll show you how I would use them in solo settings, in Franck or things like that, or how I would use them in consort registrations, in things like Svelinck. They're very, very versatile. They're very French in character, though. You would not use this 16-foot in Bach, for example, for your An Wasserfluss in Babylon. It can't keep up with you, and it will let you know that it is not happy, and you will realize the error of your ways and apologize to the organ and do something else. But the bombard is terrific, and again, this swell box makes it fantastic. But the bombard, the 8-foot trumpet is where the real power is. I was going to say fire, but also this is the stop we kind of wait. Even when a piece says un Grayce, if we are doing this in a crescendo way, that's the stop you need to wait on, because it's huge and you know it's there immediately. And then the hautbois, which you don't want to hear in a fanfare. Beautiful solo stop, and all together you get a really fantastic and very, very satisfying sound from softest to. And with the plein jeu, it's a full division in itself. So, and the swell box makes it incredibly effective for doing a crescendo. It's so satisfying to play French music and hear Vierne, Tournemire, Widor, Messiaen, Schmidt, all of these things. It's just really, really, Florence is fabulous in this room, really fabulous. In the positif, as we've talked about, we don't have anche positif. There was not room in the case to put in a positif trumpet and that sort of thing. But on the grate, we have an 8-foot trumpet and a 4-foot clairon. It's the only 4-foot reed on the organ. We don't have a 16-foot bombard, except for the one that we've got in the swell, but we've got this terrific trumpet.
Big too.
It's quite big. It's very sharp. So we tend to save it for the ends of things. If you're sitting in front of the organ and the decibel level is over 100, you might want to save it for the end, but it's a beautiful trumpet. It can sort of masquerade as a tuba. We have told it this. It halfway believes us, so if we're playing something that's English, and I'll show it today in that capacity, in the room, it rounds out for that, and it works much more in the lower register, as you might think. If you were soloing out for a hymn, it kind of works, or in your howls, you'll get your fantastic chords there when you need them. It's a little brighter up there. So we like to tell it that it can be a tuba if it wants to be, but it doesn't have to be. And with the clairon, it's really quite bright. And when you put all of the trumpets together, we don't play a ton of Spanish music here, but everybody needs to do a batalla and a tiento, just like everyone needs to do an elevation toccata so that we know what these things are. We can bring all of those reeds down together and get a pretty exciting sound, actually, with the brightness in there of all of these things together. It is. It's a really big sound.
That's
and then
impressive.
you have the pizzona in the bottom. So I'll play a little bit from a Spanish batalla just to show that. So those are the reeds. We've also got in the pedal, though, a big pizzona, which is fantastic, and we would use that in all of our things, like in our Messiaen. I'll play you just a little bit of Dieu parmi nous. Low C is my favorite.
It's amazing.
And she knows it. But because this organ is tuned in Fisk 2 temperament, which is an absolutely fantastic, I think that was a wonderful decision. It gives you just enough sizzle in some of the other keys that you understand what a temperament is, especially as a teaching organ. But when you play in C major, it's like in our famous Oklahoma storms, when that ray of sunshine, when they spark through the clouds, that's what C major is on this organ. When you end a Howells piece in C major, it's just like all the sunbeams have just come out, because it's so clean, it's so pure and beautiful, and I love that. And that is the crowning note, is that pizzana.
Other stops in the pedal, we have the 16-foot press stunt. Is that the same as the?
Yes.
Those are great.
For space-saving reasons, very, very cleverly, a few of the pedal stops are borrowed from the other divisions, but they're on their own draw knobs. So you can use them independently, which is enormously helpful. So the 16-foot press stunt is borrowed from the Grayce, and the flute 8 and violon 8 are borrowed from the Grayce.
Okay.
But again, they've got their own knob. And the bombard and trompette are borrowed from the swell, but again, you can use them independently. It doesn't just have to be the couplers.
Yeah.
Very, very well thought out. We
That's handy.
also very cleverly and very thankfully, we have a swell super pedal so that we can do things like use the bombard 16 up an octave as an independent chorale voice for something. And it gives us one more trumpet and one more option.
Well, and even
or
the
the
oboe
hautbois.
has a
Yeah.
4-foot. Yeah, so even though you only have the one 4-foot reed, you still have that plus anything else you want to use. If you need solos in the pedal, you can
Yeah,
brighten up.
they're incredibly useful, and I've done that actually. I did that on the recording. You'd never know it, but I used, again, because it's the only Borden, and I needed a Borden color in the pedal. And you wouldn't have known that otherwise. So really incredibly well thought out. This organ was designed by a professor, a veteran professor of many, many years with a fantastic teaching history. Dr. Kelly really put incredible thought into this. And the master builders at Fisk also contributed, and we ended up with, I think, one of their most beautiful organs, but the room, it's such a marriage
Yeah, the
with the
acoustics in
space.
here are just amazing. And I've been walking around, and maybe if you get underneath the door, it gets a little shaded, but everywhere I've been in this room, the sound is just wonderful. The organ speaks. It fills
It
the
really
space.
does. It's just fantastic. I have one time a week alone with this organ. That's very, very early on Sunday mornings. And I rarely, at this point, because I've been here for 10 years now, I almost never use any stops other than the foundations when I practice, just for practicality. But just the magic of being in this room in the early morning alone is really precious to me, and the action is terrific. So I love to practice in here, but I only get it once a week for that kind of quiet. I can use it during the week, but I'm very judicious because we have to respect the space and other people's needs in here.
There's one other Fisk trademark over there, and that is our flexible wind.
Yes.
Now these, I've been told, function two different ways depending on the organist or who designed the instrument. Either that knob turns the flexible wind on or it turns it off.
Brent, I have no idea.
Let's find out how this works.
Okay, how are we going to find
this
this
is how
out?
I would do it. I would turn on a full chorus, 16, 8, and 4.
You're going to get
mixtures.
the Messiaen piston.
Okay.
Now, if I played that chord several times in succession,
we want to hear a bounce.
The bellows would get really upset with me.
Well, right, but how about if you just held the right hand, but maybe bounced the left hand, just played a... That sounds pretty stable, so let's try turning. So, it turns it on when you want to have a little more bounce in your step there, so good to know. This instrument is fairly compact and easy enough to get into. We have some panels here in the back that open up to allow access to the console. The wind chest for the grate is above us, so getting up into that division involves a ladder. And here's the grate pipework. And the positive is above. We have pedal pipes along the back. The walkboard for the positive folds out of the way when it's not needed so you can get through. And that allows access to these pipes. And we have the Grayce immediately above our head, the roller board there. The stop action for the Grayce is here. Looking down, you can see how closely integrated the grate and positive are. And then we have a ladder that takes us up to the Grayce. There is a similar panel on the other side of the case, if you want to come up that way. A bit of a gap to get over once you get up here. Getting into the swell involves removing some of the reed pipes. Here's the Fisk swell shades, where the first two open first and close last. And there are shades on 3 sides of the box. Case, some of the organ does extend above the top of the case, so the swell box is only tall where it needs to be. And protruding pipework has been painted to match the wall. Damin, thank you so much for meeting us here this morning to demonstrate this wonderful Fisk organ. It's one I've got recordings of, and I've heard about it, and people have told me about it. And it's great to get to hear it. It's a lot of efficiencies in a small space, but it has such a big, amazing sound in this room. So thank you for all of the wonderful, thoughtful selections to show off what it can do best. This must just be fun every week to come in here and try to find something new.
It's an honor to teach here. Thank you for coming. I have long hoped that we'd be able to do this because I'm such a supporter of the Organ Media Foundation and Organ Live. I love the videos that you go around doing of organs. I love seeing my good friend Andrew Schaefer being magical with all the organs that you all go to show, but I think you're doing a tremendous service to preserve and promote these instruments, especially the ones that are lesser known. So thank you for including us on your trip.
I'm so happy we could do it, and she puts her money where her mouth is. She is a supporter of the Organ Media Foundation and one of our board members, so helps to keep all the legal stuff going that allows us to get out and do stuff like this. And yeah, there are some more videos with Andrew, I believe, coming out soon. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And until those videos are out, you have, well, a new CD coming out.
I
Just
do.
recorded this spring, correct?
It recorded in January at the very end of the winter break, and it will be released. It'll go to the press, to the printing plant this week, actually. It took me a long time to put it together because this organ does so many things beautifully, but I wanted it to really be itself. I always work so hard to, as you know, because we've been friends for a long time, I try really, really painstakingly and in a very scholarly way to match repertoire with an organ. I mean, one of them comes before the other. It's either I find the organ that I like for the Pierre Kunck, that Jean Abbaye organ that nobody knows about and needs to, or when I've got something as majestic as this beautiful Fisk, and I thought, okay, what will really, really make this organ sing in a recording sense, in which I think of as a document. And French is what I landed on, and I worked very, very hard and had a tremendous amount of people help me with the scholarship. I got to thank so many people in the liner notes, but it's all music by women who were students of Marcel Dupré, but who are lesser known because Mildred Andrews studied with Marcel Dupré. Everybody knows that Dupré was perhaps the foremost European pedagogue in the first part of the 20th century, very far into the 20th century. Mildred studied with him. Dorothy Young-Rees, one of the OU graduates, a very dear friend and very important. She studied with Marcel Dupré. Claire Cocci studied with Marcel Dupré. He had such an impression on people, but his female students, apart from de Messieu and Falcinelli, have not been discussed. So it's a really, really interesting disc of music by Henriette Puig-Roger. Jeanne Joulin, I've included a little bit of her today in what we've recorded for our talk, and a little bit of Marie-Louise Giraud. Both Henriette Puig-Roger and Marie-Louise Giraud were organists for the Oratoire du Louvre, and then Germaine Lebol, who is sort of the most mysterious of these women. She wrote 2 pieces, and she wrote a symphony. She's, to the best of my knowledge, the only 20th century French woman who wrote an organ solo symphony, and she dedicated it to Dupré. So that was the piece of music that I knew I wanted to include, and it was in looking for companion pieces to go with her symphony that made me start exploring other women that studied with Dupré because of that, but there's very little known about her. So I think it turned out really tremendously, and it's a small homage to Mildred Andrews and to all of these women, some of whom only passed away in the 20-teens, who had these tremendous careers, but in the shadows.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful that you've done all that work. I'm sure by the time the video is out, if you're watching this, the CD is out, so there'll be a link down below where you can find it, and a link to your website because you've got many CDs available. What's your website?
Just DaminSpritzer.com.
There we go, and you can find everything she's recorded. Lots of unique things that nobody else has even touched, so that's really amazing. And, of course, that album will be available on our 3 streaming stations. Well, not all of them. It'll be on OrganLive.com, not positively Baroque because it's 20th century music, but it will be on Organ Experience Cornets as well, and you can find a link to all of those on our website, organ.media, where you can also find out about becoming a sponsor of the Organ Media Foundation and links to all of our projects. Thank you again, Damin. This has been fantastic to come and hear this instrument and to get a firsthand look at it. And I look forward to many more recordings and fun things coming out of Oklahoma.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Thank you so much.
Until next time, I'm Brent Johnson. Thank you for watching.